The calm mind, Buddha's secret to inner peace and clarity. There are moments when the noise of the world becomes too heavy. The endless scrolling, the constant comparison, the invisible pressure to always be doing. In that quiet exhaustion, the mind starts to whisper a truth we've forgotten. Peace doesn't come from control, but from letting go. Samatha, the ancient Buddhist practice of calm abiding, is not an escape from reality. It is the art of seeing clearly without being shaken. It teaches that stillness is not the absence of motion, but the presence of awareness, a mind that rests like a clear lake, untouched by the wind of distraction. In a time when anxiety has become normal and silence feels uncomfortable, Samatha reminds us of something timeless, that serenity is not something we chase, it is something we remember. Chapter 1. The Breath That Anchors. He sat in silence, not trying to clear his thoughts but simply noticing them. The noise of the day still echoed in his head. Messages, deadlines, unfinished plans, all swirling like dust in sunlight. And then, slowly, he began to breathe. Each inhale felt like the world entering, each exhale like it was leaving again. The breath became an anchor, something real, something always here. In the beginning, the mind resisted. It wanted to chase ideas, solve problems, plan tomorrow. But each time it drifted away, he gently returned to the rhythm of his breathing, as if saying, "I'm home." This is how Samatha begins, not with control, but with gentle awareness. The breath is no longer just oxygen. It becomes a bridge between body and mind, a thread that connects scattered thoughts into stillness. With every mindful breath, the heart slows, the tension loosens, and the world softens at the edges. He realized that calm is not something to create, it's something to uncover. Beneath the noise, there was always this quiet pulse of life, this steady rhythm of being alive. When the mind learns to rest on the breath, it discovers stability, not the absence of thought, but the strength to remain calm within it. The air moves in and out, like waves on a quiet shore, and for a brief, sacred moment, nothing needs to be changed. Reflection. Peace is not the silence of the world, but the silence within the noise. The breath does not take you away from life, it brings you closer to it. Chapter 2. The Noise Within. Ethan used to think silence was simply the absence of sound. He was wrong. When he tried to be quiet, he discovered a different kind of noise, one that came from within. His thoughts rushed in like an overcrowded subway. Memories, worries, what-ifs, and to-do lists all shouting over one another, competing for his attention. He realized that even when his phone was off and the city outside had fallen asleep, the world inside his mind never stopped buzzing. Meditation apps promised peace in 5 minutes, but he couldn't sit still for 30 seconds without checking the time or doubting if he was doing it right. He felt trapped, not by traffic or deadlines, but by the constant narration of his own mind. One afternoon, tired of running from his thoughts, Ethan sat down on the floor of his small apartment. He closed his eyes, crossed his legs, and decided to stop fighting. The noise didn't disappear, but something subtle changed. He began to listen instead of resist. Some thoughts were kind, others were sharp, but as he observed them come and go, he noticed something new. They lost their grip when he stopped reacting. He understood, for the first time, what his mentor had meant when she said, "You don't need to silence the mind. You just need to stop believing every word it says." That night, as the city lights flickered through his window, Ethan felt a quiet stillness spreading through him. Not empty, not forced, but alive. Reflection. True calm isn't found in escaping noise, but in recognizing that peace begins the moment you stop identifying with it. Chapter 3. Breathing in Stillness. The next morning, Ethan woke up before dawn. For once, it wasn't the alarm that pulled him from sleep, it was curiosity. He remembered something his mentor had told him: the breath is the anchor of the present moment. So he sat again, cross-legged on the floor, letting the early light spill through the curtains. At first, his breathing felt mechanical. Inhale, exhale, repeat. But after a few minutes, he noticed something shifting. His breath wasn't something he was doing. It was something happening to him. It had been there all along, quietly carrying him through every rush, every anxiety, every sleepless night. He followed it like a thread, weaving through layers of tension he hadn't known he was holding. Each exhale softened his shoulders. Each inhale drew him deeper into awareness. The noise from yesterday was still there, fragments of thought drifting through, but now they seemed distant, like echoes fading in a vast space. Ethan realized the mind didn't need to be forced into silence. It just needed something steady to rest on. The breath became that steady ground. It didn't demand control or perfection, just attention. Minutes turned into what felt like moments. When he finally opened his eyes, the city had awakened outside, but inside him, there was only stillness, simple, grounded, and real. He smiled. For the first time, peace didn't feel like something to find. It felt like something to remember. Reflection. Calm is not created, it's uncovered. Beneath the rush of thoughts, peace has always been breathing with you. Chapter 4. The Weight of Distraction. By the end of the week, Ethan had noticed something unexpected. The more he tried to bring calm into his life, the louder the world seemed to get. His phone buzzed constantly, messages stacked up, notifications blinked like neon lights in the dark. Even when he silenced it, his mind replayed imaginary alerts, phantom vibrations that made him reach for a device that wasn't even there. He realized that distraction wasn't just external, it lived inside him. His thoughts jumped like restless monkeys, swinging from one branch to another. Work, relationships, plans, fears. He tried to meditate again, but the stillness he'd found before felt miles away. Then he remembered something his mentor had said: Samatha is not about escaping the noise, it's about befriending it. So instead of fighting his thoughts, Ethan decided to sit with them. He watched each one rise, flicker, and fall away, like leaves drifting down a stream. Slowly, the chaos softened. He began to notice a strange peace in simply observing. The urge to control faded. Even the distractions, when seen clearly, lost their power. They were just passing moments, not enemies to be defeated. Ethan opened his eyes to a quiet room. Nothing outside had changed. The phone still blinked, the world still moved, but something within him had settled. He wasn't chasing calm anymore. He was becoming it. Reflection. Peace doesn't come from silencing the world. It comes from learning to listen without being carried away. Chapter 5. Breathing through the storm. A few days later, the city was alive with motion and sound. Ethan sat in a crowded cafe, surrounded by conversations, clattering cups, and the steady hum of espresso machines. Normally, this chaos would make him uneasy. Too much movement, too many thoughts pressing at once. But today, he decided to meet the noise differently. He closed his eyes for a moment and took a long, deliberate breath in. The air filled his lungs like a wave rising from the ocean floor. Then he exhaled slowly, feeling the tension drain from his shoulders. He repeated this gentle rhythm, inhale, exhale, until the noise faded into something distant, almost musical. Each breath became an anchor, pulling him back from the restless tides of his own mind. Around him, life continued. The barista called out names, milk steamed, and laughter rippled through the air. Yet within that noise, Ethan felt something open, a quiet space vast enough to hold the world. He realized that Samatha wasn't about escaping the storm, but breathing through it with awareness and grace. His thoughts still wandered, but he no longer fought them. Each time they drifted, he returned to the breath. Again and again, like a monk tracing the same sacred circle. Calm, he understood now, was not the absence of chaos, but the peace that blooms when one stops resisting life's flow. When he stepped out into the street, nothing had changed, and yet everything had. Reflection. When the breath becomes your home, even the storm becomes rhythm. Calm is not found outside. It is created, one mindful breath at a time. Chapter 6. The Weight of Stillness. Weeks passed, and Ethan noticed how silence began to change him. It was no longer an empty pause between moments, but a living presence, dense, rich, almost tangible. Sitting on his small apartment floor, he would close his eyes and feel the pulse of the city beneath him, the faint hum of electricity in the walls, and the quiet rhythm of his own heartbeat. In that stillness, his thoughts would rise and fall like waves. Some carried worry, others memories, others pure noise. He used to fight them, to silence them with effort. Now, he simply watched. Like clouds drifting across a vast sky, they came and went. He began to understand that the mind doesn't need to be forced into calm. It only needs to be seen clearly, with patience and compassion. The more he practiced, the lighter his chest felt. The anxiety that once sat like a stone began to soften. He realized that samatha wasn't a skill to master, but a relationship to nurture, a dialogue between attention and breath, between the world and the self. Sometimes the mind was still, sometimes it wasn't. Both were fine. The peace came not from control, but from surrender. The stillness he sought wasn't something to hold, it was the space to let go. That night, Ethan looked out his window at the glowing city and whispered, "Stillness is not nothing, it's everything I've been running from." Reflection. Peace doesn't arrive when the noise stops, it begins when you stop running from it. In stillness, you discover not emptiness, but presence. Chapter 7. The Mirror of the Mind. Ethan began to notice something subtle in his daily meditation. As his breath slowed and the noise within him softened, he started to see his thoughts not as distractions, but as reflections. Each image, each memory, each fear that surfaced during practice was like a mirror showing him parts of himself he had ignored. Some days, what he saw made him uneasy. The impatience, the self-doubt, the quiet hunger for validation. Yet, instead of turning away, he kept observing. This was the true discipline of samatha, not the suppression of thought, but the gentle watching of it without judgment. With every inhale, he offered space. With every exhale, he released resistance. The mind, he realized, is like a pond. When the surface is agitated, you see only distortion. But when it becomes still, everything beneath reveals itself clearly. And in that reflection, he met his own humanity, fragile, searching, beautiful in its imperfection. The more he practiced, the more compassion he felt. Not just for himself, but for everyone lost in their own restless thoughts, fighting their invisible storms. He understood that peace wasn't isolation from the world, it was connection without chaos. When he opened his eyes, the city outside seemed different. It wasn't quieter, but it felt more honest, more real. The mirror had turned outward. Reflection. Meditation doesn't change who you are, it reveals who you've always been beneath the ripples. When the mind becomes still, truth has nowhere left to hide. Chapter 8. The Gentle Discipline. There were mornings when Ethan didn't want to sit. The alarm would sound, the light would creep through the curtains, and his mind would whisper, "Not today." The bed felt warm, the world felt demanding, and meditation seemed like a luxury he could skip. Yet those were the days that shaped him the most. Showing up, even unwillingly, was itself an act of courage. He began to understand that samatha was not a technique to master, but a friendship to nurture. It wasn't about silencing thoughts, it was about sitting with them, patiently, until they softened. Like taming a wild animal, it required tenderness more than strength. The mind didn't respond to force, it opened only in the presence of gentle attention. Some mornings, the breath felt uneven, the body restless, the mind cluttered. But he stayed. He breathed through the resistance until it dissolved into calm awareness. In that persistence, he found humility. Calmness, he realized, was not a prize at the end of effort. It was the fruit of simply staying when everything in him wanted to leave. As weeks passed, this discipline began to spill into his daily life. He spoke slower, listened deeper, and reacted less. He noticed that silence had begun to speak through him, quietly guiding, quietly teaching. Samatha was no longer something he practiced. It had become a way of being. Reflection. Peace is not won through control but through kindness. Each time you return to the breath, you remind the mind that it is safe to rest. The gentle discipline of coming back, again and again, is the essence of freedom. Chapter 9. The Space Between Thoughts. One evening, as dusk settled over the city, Ethan sat cross-legged before the open window. The air was cool, carrying the hum of distant traffic and the faint song of insects in the dark. He focused on his breath, steady and unhurried, until the border between inhalation and exhalation began to blur. Between those breaths, something opened, a subtle pause, quiet yet vast. In that pause, he felt it, the space between thoughts. It wasn't empty. It was alive, radiant with awareness. For the first time, he sensed that consciousness existed before every idea, every worry, every story his mind created. It was like discovering the still sky that had always been there, hidden behind the moving clouds. He realized that peace was not about changing his thoughts but about resting in the space beneath them. Every moment of awareness became a window into stillness, a reminder that his essence wasn't the noise of the mind but the silence that witnessed it. That night, he didn't chase enlightenment. He didn't seek answers. He simply watched the dance of thoughts come and go, breathing softly in the middle of it all. And in that simplicity, he touched a serenity that words could never describe, a serenity that had been waiting all along, patient as breath. When he finally opened his eyes, the city lights shimmered like stars fallen to earth. For the first time, he didn't feel separate from them, just another flicker of light in the vast, breathing night. Reflection. The calm you seek is not beyond the mind. It lives in the quiet space between thoughts. When you rest there, even for a moment, you remember what you truly are, stillness aware of itself. Chapter 10. Living the Calm. Months had passed since Ethan first sat down to follow his breath. What began as an experiment had quietly reshaped his entire way of living. Calm was no longer something he visited during meditation. It began to follow him into traffic, into conversations, into moments of uncertainty. The breath had become a silent companion, steady and faithful, reminding him that peace was always one inhale away. He noticed how different the world felt when seen through stillness. The same city noises, the same worries, the same faces, but everything seemed softer, more connected. He understood now that calm didn't mean detachment. It meant meeting life fully, with an open heart and an unshaken center. Some days were still hard. Old fears resurfaced, distractions pulled him away, and the mind wandered endlessly. But even then, there was no frustration, only awareness. Samatha had taught him that peace is not a destination. It's a practice, a gentle return. Again and again, the breath led him home. One morning, as sunlight filled the room, Ethan realized something profound. Stillness wasn't a break from life. It was life, experienced without resistance. In every moment of awareness, he touched the timeless space that Buddha had pointed to centuries ago. The calm that neither clings nor rejects, simply is. He smiled softly, breathing in gratitude. For the first time, he wasn't chasing serenity, he was living it. Reflection. Peace is not something you find. It's something you remember. Each breath invites you to return, to the present, to yourself, to the calm that has always lived within. The quiet revolution. In the end, Ethan's story was not about retreating from the world, but about returning to it, awake, aware, and unshaken. The calm he found was not distant or mystical. It lived in the smallest pauses, in the rhythm of his breath, in the silence beneath every word. Samatha had revealed a quiet revolution, one that began not with force or ambition, but with stillness. Through the gentle discipline of presence, he discovered that every ordinary moment could become sacred when met with a calm heart. We spend our lives searching for peace, not realizing it is the very ground we stand on. The practice is simple. Breathe, observe, and remember who you are beneath the noise. The calm mind is not a goal, it's your natural state, patiently waiting for your return. Reflection. Stillness is the greatest teacher. In learning to be calm, you learn to be fully alive. If this story spoke to you, continue your journey. Watch our next video and explore how mindfulness heals the emotional self.